Well, hey everybody, welcome once again to This is the Life. This is a series of video podcasts. So we're talking about our series, This is the Life, where we're looking at the book of Proverbs and trying to understand what this godly wisdom means for our life and what it means to apply it to our everyday life. So what we've talked about throughout this series is that wisdom is not just something in your mind, it's not just information, it's learning to follow God's ways and learning how to apply God's wisdom to our everyday life. So we've been looking at all different kinds of Proverbs. There's hundreds of different Proverbs that we see from chapters 10 through 29. And so we're taking a look at some of them that we think really stand out and tell us a lot about the kind of wisdom that Proverbs is telling us about. My name is Wes Schrickle, and I am one of the pastors here at the Orchard, and I am joined here by Gene Middleton and by Sissy Foster, and they are from our Orchard Starkville campus. So this is my favorite interview that I'm doing so far because these are my own people, and I know that they are full of godly wisdom and that they're going to be able to share a lot of that with us today. So today we are looking at, I would think is probably one of the more famous Proverbs, at least when you think of Proverbs that people might know. Proverbs 27:17 is one of those Proverbs, and it says, "As iron sharpens iron, so a friend sharpens a friend." So like a lot of these Proverbs, they're really short statements, but man, they have a lot of great insight just in a two stanza kind of sentence. So when we look at this, I don't know much about sharpening iron or whatever, but I know that you use this, like with a knife, you'd take it up against a rock and you sharpen it in that way. And so this seems the point that this proverb is trying to make is that a good friend is invaluable, that a good friend is someone who makes you better. And I just wonder in your life if that has held true. If when you read this psalm, that seems like something that has held true, not just in your everyday life, but just in your walk with Christ.
Oh, absolutely. That's the truth. I mean, even friends that I have had for 40 plus years, and then new friends that I've had even from the time that we moved to Starkville 8 years ago, and in our church and in our women's group. We can't come up here and talk without talking about our ladies group.
It's a great group.
Because we all say that what we have in common is that we're all transplants from somewhere else. None of us have lived in Starkville for a really long time. But just what a joy and a blessing it is to meet with and be supported by other women who have the common goal of being more like Jesus.
Yeah. Sissy, what has friendship meant to you?
I've found that friendships that are grounded in faith are very different than the friendships that aren't grounded in faith.
Yeah, that's good.
The friendships in faith carry on throughout the years. The friendships in faith call you to be a better version of yourself.
That's right.
They hold you accountable. They encourage you. They allow you to be transparent with who you really are, that part of you want to keep hidden.
Yeah.
And those kind of friendships are the ones that help you weather the storms,
Right.
that are joyful when you need joy, when you're celebrating something and there's no envy with it. So I've found that my friendships that have always, where Jesus is at the center of it, those are the ones that have carried me through.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm thinking too, one of our core values at the Orchard is that discipleship happens best in community. And I was thinking how much that in our current age of smartphones and the internet and like being connected in all those kinds of ways, it seems like we're forgetting the art of friendship and forgetting how important it is to spend time face to face. And of course we went through COVID, so we were had to lock down and be away from people. But I wonder as you have grown in your relationship with Christ, if you've seen that need grow more than maybe when you were a younger person or younger in your faith, if you see that need for intentional friendship even more now than you used to.
Yeah, well, I think I would say, first of all, I'm of the older generation. So I've always preferred face to face with people, or a conversation with a person one-on-one rather than just a text or something like that. And so when COVID came along, we did a lot of things, online, and that was all good, and that was wonderful, and that was, technology was great to have during that time, but there's something that you really miss about, like Sissy was talking about, the transparency and sharing with people, and I'll also say that in recent years I've lost people, friends who were very close to me, and I find that I feel like I've got to be more intentional with my time. The older you get, the more your mortality becomes real, and so I'm thinking, Jesus, I've got to get to work. Show me what you want me to do and where you want me to be and whose life you want me to pour into.
Yeah, and I remember you specifically saying that, and that was one of the reasons why the women's group really started and became what it did, because you had this urgency about you that we've got to do this now, because as you grow, you do realize, like, that time goes by a lot faster than maybe it did when you were a kid. I don't know if that actually is a thing where when you get older, time literally goes faster. I think there's still 60 minutes in an hour, but it doesn't feel like it anymore, as you grow. But yeah, that just knowledge that something that kind of, when I think about, like, what are the things that really matter and that you take with you, it seems like the things that matter most in life are not possessions or not money, it's not anything like that. It's the relationships, like that's what and that's really the way we get to affect people's lives the most. And what God has called us to do is to be in relationship with people and use that relationship to influence. And so we're I guess talking about something else even then, and not just about friendships that have helped us, but intentionally trying to work in people's lives. So just thinking of in our specific context in Starkville, in a college town, Sissy, you're a big part of the women's group too. And I know one of the things you guys have tried to do is to intentionally make relationships with college students, young women who are in college. And I just kind of wonder, why is that important to you, and what have you noticed as that God is doing in those relationships as you have started them?
Well, I look out and I see these kids, the guys and the girls, that have this faith. They're coming to church, they're coming to Bible study, they are so active in their faith, and God has so much planned for them. And I think about myself and the time I wasted. I was a believer, but I wasn't all in. And so I look at these kids that just have a heart for Christ, and I just want to be their cheerleader. I'm awed by them, and I want to pour in and encourage them, because the changes that they can make in their life, I waited and I look back and I have some regret, but my journey was my journey. But I see them and I just want to help them reach that potential, because I see God working in their life. Yeah. And so I want to be a voice of encouragement, because they're going to do just amazing things and I can see it. So that's why it's so important to me. And then the wisdom that we learn, like in our Bible study, from the kids around us, basically, it astounds us. We're like, whoa, that is so good. And so that part of it, moving here, that was not even on my radar. And that has become so close to my heart, learning from these kids and encouraging them.
Well, and I remember a conversation with you similar to with Jean. I remember you telling you're what a pastor basically dreams for. Someone who moves into town, starts coming to your church, and then one of the first times you meet with them, say, "Hey, just plug us in. We want to serve. We want to do whatever we can." It was like, oh man, I wish this happened every day. So right from the start, you've been trying to invest in those relationships too. I wonder if each one of you wouldn't mind just sharing briefly about someone who has been a person, an individual that has been really impactful in your faith and in your life. Either one of you.
Gosh, quite a few, but I mean, I would just have to say my mother more than anybody. You know, she just set the example for me from a very young age about, you know, if you're a follower of Christ, that's your priority, you know, and like what we've said before, and I can never say this right, but I heard Will Rambo say it first, I think, about, you know, if we're not intentional about doing those things that we really want to happen, they're not going to accidentally happen.
That's right.
You know, it has to be intentional. And I think I learned that from my mom. Now I went astray. I've not been, you know, just growing exponentially in the faith all these years, but I would have to say that my foundational motivation and example probably came from my mom.
Yeah, that's really great. Sissy?
And very similarly, both my grandmother and my mom. But there was, back when I was kind of struggling and making decisions for myself, is this truly what I believe, instead of just it was what I was taught, was a younger woman in our church, and there was something different about her. And I continued to watch her and watch her and watch her. And she kept inviting me to Bible study, but I was always too busy to go to Bible study. But I knew she had something more than I had. And I eventually went to her Bible study. And so she is the one, and she was younger than me, you know, that helped me find that true relationship, or walked with me on that. And so from that point on, my relationship went from just being a believer to actually having that intimate relationship with Christ.
Yeah, and someone as an example for you to be able to do that. And I think both of you have showed this point, is that it's not necessarily just one person in your journey. It's multiple people. And
Absolutely.
I could say in my personal life, it's been every sort of point in my life, in my journey, there's always been someone. You know, God has always put someone, and it is, we talk about them as maybe like, you know, a Paul and Timothy kind of relationship, where, you know, you need to have a Paul in your life, someone mentoring you, but you also need to have a Timothy in your life, someone that you are investing in. And I just think every way, for me along the path, it was like my youth pastor first, and you know, it was professors in college and seminary, and then, you know, here at the Orchard, I've had Brian and Will, and just people who they've typically been older than me, and they've been helped me to kind of to learn life and ministry and how to navigate all those things. So, I mean, in the end of the day, that this proverb is telling us that a certain kind of person, and I think that's what is important to note here, is that a certain kind of person makes you a better person.
Yep.
Yes.
There's just some people, I've heard other people say it in a sense of that, like, you know, we talk about like communion and worship and things like that as means of grace, ways that we interact with God, but God can use human beings, individuals, as a means of grace for us. And that's why community is so important. That's why it's so important to be intentional about these friendships and getting to know other people and giving of yourself to those people, right? Like that's probably something that we would all say is indicative of all of these kind of relationships that we've talked about. These people sacrificed for you.
Yes.
Right? They're people who went out of their way. They sacrificed their time. They sacrificed their income. They sacrificed in a lot of different ways because they put you and me above themselves.
Right.
And that was more important to them. So as iron sharpens iron, so a friend sharpens another friend. They make you a sharper person, a better person. That there can be a kind of person that when you're around, they bring joy to you, but they also, I don't know if you've met people like this. I think you have, just based on what you, and you know, you've both been this for me in life, is that when you're with someone and you feel closer to God because you're with them, because of their friendship, then that's a really important thing. But with all of these Proverbs, we've seen that what Proverbs likes to do is it likes to compare and contrast the wise person from the foolish person. We want to be a person of wisdom. We don't want to be a fool and go the way of the wise person is a blessed life, fearing God and following God. The way of a foolish person is destruction. And so a lot of these Proverbs, what we've been doing is kind of just inverting them and saying, all right, well, if this is what a wise person does, then what does a foolish person do? Well, if iron sharpens iron as a friend sharpens another, I think that it's the same thing, like that friends can dull you as well. Like certain people, depending on the relationships, and we don't want to throw any people under the bus, so we're probably not going to mention names or relationships, but we probably all have examples of people and times in our life when we hung out with the wrong crowd or hung out with the wrong people and their lives were going one way, and going the opposite way of where God was calling them to go, and that they can dull you, whatever sharpness you have, that progress you're making towards a relationship with Christ, that there could be certain people in your life that could dull you. I don't want to ask you names or anything like that, but has that been something that you've experienced in your life as well?
Can you speak to that, Sissy?
Yeah, I can. I think sometimes when you're in situations where people maybe are not making the best decisions, whatever that looks like, it makes it okay. So all of a sudden, your expectation or what you think is right or wrong, it's been changed. It's not what God says is right or wrong. And there's that, if you put a frog in boiling water, he'll try to jump out. But if you put him in and then turn the water on, he won't know he's boiling.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think that depending on what kind of relationships you're in, you can be that frog and you don't even see it happening. It's so subtle and it's okay.
Well,
But it's not.
I think you highlight the big difference there in that the person who sharpens you is someone who cares about you.
Yep.
And they are pointing you in the direction of God. They're the kind of person that when you're messing up, that they don't have a problem telling you.
Yeah.
But I think the person that dulls us is a person who probably doesn't have your best interest in mind, but has their own best interest in mind and is not concerned about pointing you to God. I feel like this is one of those things, as a former youth pastor, I feel like this is one of those messages that we say to teenagers a lot. Be careful who you hang out with. And I know you both are mothers, so you probably experienced this at least at some point raising children.
Yes.
That you saw it, maybe pretty clearly in teenage years of like, you be careful who you spend your time with, be careful who you hang out with, because it'll change you.
Yeah,
and it can change you. A person can change you. Sharpening is a change. Dulling is a change. And as isolated as we might become in this world of technology, people, even through social media, they affect us. Who we follow, who we
what we listen
to. All those things are people affecting us in different ways. And just paying attention, is this sharpening me? Is this bringing me closer to Jesus? Is it making me look more like Jesus? Does this person help me look more like Jesus? Or is this person...
Is it pulling me away?
Right. But I think it's also important that we say, one of our other core values here at the Orchard is to reach people that no one else is reaching. And so because we talk about like having these friends, that doesn't mean we can't ever spend time with people who are far from God, right? I mean, we try to do what we can to intentionally seek out people who are far from Jesus, people who don't know Jesus, and sometimes their lives don't always, look real neat and tidy.
Right.
But it's still really important for us to be with those people.
And I think one of the words there is intentional. I think when you start getting dulled, it's because the intentionality is gone. When you're intentional in trying to spread Jesus's love and spend time with people that are in different places in their life, that's intentional. The dullness seems to happen when you're not paying attention.
That's
Yeah,
right.
it's easy to happen that way. And I just think about having the friends that we talk about sharpening us. That's kind of got to be like the home base, you know. We
Yes.
like church, you know. We come and we gather together and we sharpen one another. We grow in our relationship with Christ, but then we scatter.
Yep.
And when we go
Right.
out into the world, and so by no means are we telling people only spend your time with people that have it all together all the time.
Right.
But it is important for us to have that base community, for us to grow and for us to be strengthened, so that we can have the Spirit of God, that we can have the faithfulness to go out and to be able to bear fruit for Christ's kingdom.
And one thing with the ladies group that we've talked about, for me, there's a level of accountability. Nobody says it, but there's this level of accountability. And, you know, I watch these other women of God, and I can model after them. They bring different gifts. They bring different things to the table. And so I learn by being around other women of faith, and that does sharpen me. It helps me learn. And, you know, where I've got weaknesses, talking too much, gently reminded.
Yeah.
Things that aren't just within the Christian community, but just that make me more effective as a follower of Christ.
Yeah.
And that small group brings that to you, and it's a safe place to be disciplined by God, honestly,
Yeah.
you know, because it's coming from a place of love and people who love you.
Well, I know both of you have sharpened me in so many
Aw.
different ways. You offer a lot of wisdom
Wow.
to our church, and we're so blessed to have you both in our community. A lot of you who are listening, if you're looking for that kind of community, we have community available at all of our churches. No matter which church at the Orchard that you go to, we have intentional small groups and communities and ways for you to get plugged in and be in community. And I hope that you've seen from these ladies why that's so important. We want to make each other better. We want to, even though the rest of the world, we might be spending less and less time together in the church, we say no to that. We want to be together, and we want to strengthen one another. So hope you learned some wisdom to apply to your life from this conversation. We'll see you guys next episode.